The Force is old and full of shadows.
The first sensation is suffocation. Obi-Wan's eyes snap open inside his cave dwelling. His lungs, young, untrained, gasping, pull oxygen as if he's drowning in air. The stone ceiling is familiar, the soft blue glow of Tatooine's twin suns filtering through the cave entrance. But something is catastrophically wrong. He tries to move. His hands are small, narrow. He flexes his fingers, watching, really watching, as tendons shift beneath skin that shouldn't be this smooth, this unblemished. Muscle memory screams against the disconnect. His mind remembers the weight of 60 years, the ache in joints that fought in 10,000 duels, the worn hands that held Anakin's lightsaber as he fell. But the hands in front of his eyes belong to a boy. He sits up. The simple movement, one he's done thousands of times, feels alien. His spine doesn't crackle with the protests of age. His knees don't threaten to buckle. The weakness that has defined the last 19 years of his life, the physical toll of exile and loneliness and grief, is gone. A mirror sits across the cave, placed there years ago for meditation purposes. Obi-Wan moves toward it on instinct, using the Force to help him rise. And the act itself sends vertigo spiraling through his skull. The Force flows through him like a river suddenly unchained, raw, young, terrifyingly alive. The face in the mirror is his own, but it is not. The years of sun damage are erased, the deep lines around his eyes, each one a scar from decisions made, Jedi lost, empires risen, have been replaced by unblemished skin. His beard is auburn instead of gray. His hair is thick, not thinned by age and stress. And his eyes, still blue, still the same essential Obi-Wan, hold the clarity of youth, untouched by the weight of the galaxy's collapse. He is 18 years old. The knowledge hits like a thermal detonator. 60 years of consciousness crammed into an 18-year-old body. 60 years of training, combat, strategy, failure, love, loss, all intact. The muscle memory of a Jedi Master in the frame of a Padawan who was never properly tempered by real war. Because this body never experienced what his mind did. This body never held Anakin's hand as he died. This body never fled the temple as it burned. This body never spent 19 years hiding on a desert planet, watching a boy he couldn't protect grow in a moisture farm. The Force ripples around him, responding to his shock. Dust from the cave ceiling scatters. The meditation stone in the corner cracks. Obi-Wan forces himself to breathe, in and out, the way the Jedi taught him when he was actually this age, when he was a real Padawan under Qui-Gon's guidance. This is not the Force. This is not a vision. He reaches out with his senses, checking the walls of the cave, extending his consciousness into the Force to feel for deception, for illusion, for any sign that he's still meditating, and this is some catastrophic nightmare born from decades of isolation. The stone is real. The dust is real. The disturbing lightness of his own body is real. Over the next hour, Obi-Wan conducts a systematic examination. His lightsaber, stored carefully in a hidden compartment, activates with a snap hiss that sounds younger, cleaner than he remembers. The blade is blue. Correct. The weight is exactly as he remembers, but his arms now strain to hold it properly. This body has never wielded a lightsaber before. This body has never fought. His meditation reveals the truth about his circumstances. He is no longer Force-connected to the elder Kenobi he was. That consciousness, that aged awareness is simply gone, rewritten. The neural pathways of his 18-year-old brain somehow contain 60 years of data, but the physical substrate, his reflexes, his muscle memory, his body's baseline strength, are those of an untrained adolescent. It is as if he has been given the Jedi archives in written form, but his hands have never turned a page. A sound at the cave entrance freezes him. Obi-Wan's hand moves to his lightsaber before conscious thought, a reflex born from 60 years of combat reflex. But the young body's grip is uncertain, hesitant. He has to force his mind to accept the contradiction. He knows precisely how to strike down an Inquisitor with 3 lightsaber moves, but his shoulders don't have the strength to execute them yet. A Tusken Raider? No, the Force signature is wrong. Indigenous, simple, cruel, but not coordinated. But the footstep pattern is deliberate. Careful, human. Obi-Wan deactivates his lightsaber and steps deeper into the shadow of the cave, trusting the Force to guide him. His appearance, young, unused, conspicuous, cannot be revealed. Not yet. Not until he understands what has happened. a figure emerges from the bright Tatooine sun. Owen Lars. The man is older than Obi-Wan remembers. Of course he is. 19 years have passed. Owen's face is creased with the particular bitterness that comes from raising a boy you didn't choose on a planet you hate, married to a woman as resentful as you are. His clothes are dust-caked. His expression is carefully neutral, as it always was around Ben Kenobi, a compromise between fear and necessity. Ben Owen calls into the cave. You in there? Got word from the moisture miners that something strange is happening in the Junland wastes. Heard blaster fire around your area. Wanted to check you hadn't gotten caught in a territorial dispute. Obi-Wan does not respond immediately. Every instinct screams at him to reveal himself, to explain the impossible, but 60 years of tactical experience overrides that instinct. Owen does not know him as he is now. Owen expects an old man. An old man is not standing in this cave. More importantly, the Empire hunts Jedi. The Inquisitors are still active. Obi-Wan destroyed 2 of them. The Grand Inquisitor and the Second Sister, before they were even Inquisitors. He knows their patterns, their ruthlessness, their dedication to his death specifically. If Owen knew the truth of what had happened to him, the boy would be marked, a target, an leverage point. Not I, Owen, Obi-Wan calls out, his voice deliberately deeper, more cautious than his new young throat naturally produces. Just some rock fall, nothing to worry about. Owen shifts his weight, suspicious. Sounded like energy weapons. I've been on this planet long enough to know what blaster fire sounds like. An old man's imagination, Obi-Wan lies, layering the Force into the statement, a subtle suggestion, not a mind trick, but a gentle nudge toward the easiest explanation. The desert plays tricks on one's ears. I'm fine. Leave me to my hermitage. Owen stares into the darkness of the cave for another moment. The Force signature tells Obi-Wan that the man is wrestling with duty, with caution, with the desire to get back to his farm. Finally, Owen nods sharply, as if affirming his own decision to leave. There's a boy in the city, Mos Eisley, asking questions about Ben Kenobi. Stranger. Didn't give his name. I told him nothing, but you should know there's interest in you. If I were you, Owen pauses, choosing words carefully. I'd be more careful about attracting attention. Then he turns and walks back out into the Tatooine heat. Obi-Wan stands in the darkness, processing. A boy asking about Ben Kenobi. The description fits thousands of people on a desert planet, but the context, a stranger, deliberate inquiry, sets Obi-Wan's tactical line spinning through possibilities. An Imperial agent? Unlikely. The Empire doesn't send boys to track Jedi. They send Inquisitors and Stormtroopers. A bounty hunter? More plausible. The Empire has kept Obi-Wan's identity quiet, a tactical choice, probably to avoid revealing that a Jedi Master survived the Purge, but information has value. Someone may have put out a quiet inquiry. Or, the thought arrives like a shooting star. Luke Skywalker. The boy who has been living on Tatooine his entire life, 19 years, unaware of his father's history or his mother's identity. Luke, who by now must be old enough, restless enough, to be asking questions about the past. Luke, who would be approximately 18 years old. The thought that Luke might be asking about him, seeking him out, triggers something deep in Obi-Wan's chest. Guilt. Duty. The knowledge that his exile was always meant to be temporary, a transition point until Luke came of age. But there is a problem. If Luke comes to find Ben Kenobi, he will find a teenager, not an old hermit. A teenager who somehow knows things he should not know. A teenager who can use a lightsaber in ways no untrained Padawan should be able to. Obi-Wan moves back to his meditation chamber, forcing his young mind into the clarity he's cultivated over decades. The Force spreads before him like a map, not in its usual abstract way, but with the crystalline precision that comes from 60 years of practice. The timeline is tight. The Empire's officers on Tatooine are few, but they are dangerous. Governor Tarkin, though headquartered off-world, has taken an interest in small-scale Jedi hunting operations, and more immediately, there are spies. Informants. People who would report an impossible resurrection, a man decades younger than he was last week, to the Imperial authority if they saw him. Obi-Wan has 3 immediate problems. 1. He must prevent discovery by Imperial forces. A young Jedi on Tatooine is exponentially more dangerous to them than an old hermit. 2. He must reconcile his consciousness with his body, 60 years of reflexes live in an 18-year-old frame that has no experience with combat. This mismatch will kill him if he encounters actual danger. 3. He must prepare for Luke's arrival, which Owen's warning suggests is imminent. Luke cannot learn the truth about this transformation. At least not yet. The boy has been raised by Owen and Beru with lies about his father, lies designed to protect him. A young Ben Kenobi speaking with impossible knowledge and power might shatter Luke's already fragile sense of reality. The meditation deepens. Obi-Wan reaches out into the Force with the precision of a Jedi Master and the wariness of an 18-year-old suddenly confronted with the reality that his body is not yet ready for what his mind demands. The Force shows him possibilities, probable futures, threads of destiny intersecting, and in every timeline, Luke Skywalker arrives. By dawn the next morning, Obi-Wan has made a decision. He cannot hide what he is. Hiding invites discovery. Instead, he must control the narrative. He must become someone the Empire does not yet know to look for. Someone younger, stranger, unexpected. A Padawan without a master. A Jedi in hiding who emerged from the deep desert after years of solitude. The cover story builds itself. Ben Kenobi was an old hermit, yes, but the caves of Tatooine are deep, and some of them lead into caverns untouched for centuries. What if Ben Kenobi, in his final meditation, found something in those ancient spaces? A Jedi crypt. A restoration chamber built by the builders of ancient Tatooine before human settlement, an artifact that, impossibly, reversed the physical signs of age. It's improbable enough to be forgotten, mundane enough to seem accidental, and mystical enough that it explains away the impossible without inviting scrutiny. If anyone asks, he was always young. It was the age that was the illusion, born from desert hermitage and meditation discipline. But the story alone will not protect him if he cannot fight. Obi-Wan spends the day in the desert, alone, rediscovering his body. He begins with the basics. Running. His legs are fast, responsive, unweighted by decades of stress. But they tire after 10 minutes of hard sprinting, something that would have been nothing to his previous body. His lungs burn. His muscles ache. The disconnect between what his mind knows and what his body can deliver is humbling. By evening, he has run himself to exhaustion 3 times. Each time, his body recovers faster than it should. The Force, even without his conscious direction, is healing the small micro-tears in his muscles. Young tissue regenerates quickly. The second day focuses on lightsaber forms. Obi-Wan moves through the basics, Form I, Shicho, but his execution is sloppy. His young arms lack the stability to maintain proper stance. His footwork is hesitant. The muscle memory is there. His mind knows exactly how to move, but his body hasn't yet written those movements into its own reflexes. It's like trying to play music on an instrument he's held 1,000 times but is now discovering for the first time. But he is a Jedi Master. He knows how to learn. More importantly, he knows how to teach himself. By the 3rd day, he progresses to Form 3, Soresu, the form of defense, the form he perfected over decades, the form that let him stand toe-to-toe with Anakin Skywalker and survive. His young body cannot execute it perfectly, but his mind can anticipate it. As he moves through the forms, striking at nothing, the Force flows around him in patterns he's been refining since he was actually 18. Each movement is stiffer, slower, less precise than it should be, but the foundation is there. The real danger comes on the 4th day. Obi-Wan is practicing advanced deflection techniques, bouncing energy blasts off his lightsaber in tight defensive patterns when he senses something in the Force. Not a Tusken Raider, not a creature. Something else. A consciousness. Trained, dangerous, and very close. He deactivates his lightsaber and retreats into the cave, pressing himself into the shadows. The consciousness moves closer, circling the cave entrance with the patience of a hunter. This is not a random encounter. The figure emerges from the glare, a stormtrooper, or something close to one. But the armor is different, sleeker, more sinister. The helmet has red accents instead of white. And the Force signature is twisted, wrong, corrupted in ways that make Obi-Wan's newly young body recoil. An Inquisitor, not one Obi-Wan knows. This is younger than the Grand Inquisitor was at the Purge, younger than the Second Sister. An Inquisitor born from the post-Purge ranks, trained in the dark side after the Jedi Order fell. Obi-Wan's hand goes to his lightsaber, but he forces it down. He is not ready for this fight. His body will betray him. He must hide. But the Inquisitor is not searching the ground. The Inquisitor is looking up at a specific rocky outcropping above the cave entrance, and the Force pattern suggests the Inquisitor is tracking something. A youngling. Not Luke, not a person. Something smaller. A young Force-sensitive creature, probably a Tusken Raider offspring, in the way of the desert. The Inquisitor has been hunting it, tracking it through the Force. Obi-Wan makes a calculated decision. He releases a massive Force pulse, not an attack, but a distraction. A burst of pure energy that throws every grain of sand in the area into the air, triggers a minor rockfall, and sends the Tusken youngster's Force signature scattering in 4 directions at once through the confusion. The Inquisitor's attention spins toward the cave. For a moment, those terrible yellow eyes, corrupted by dark side corruption, meet Obi-Wan's blue ones. The Inquisitor does not see an old hermit, but he senses something. "Who is here?" The Inquisitor speaks, his voice filtered through the helmet's modulator. "Show yourself." Obi-Wan steps forward, keeping his hand away from his lightsaber, his Force signature deliberately dampened to seem young, untrained, afraid. "Just a boy," he calls out, "born and raised in the desert. I mean no harm to your hunt." The Inquisitor stares at him. The Force pressure intensifies. A probe, a test, attempting to pierce Obi-Wan's mental shields. But Obi-Wan has had 60 years to perfect those shields. They hold. "You hid the creature," the Inquisitor says, a statement, not a question. "I hid nothing," Obi-Wan replies calmly. "The rockfall was natural. You startled an entire warren of creatures. They scattered." A tense moment. The Inquisitor's hand moves toward his own lightsaber, a weapon with a spinning, folding design, clearly different from any blade Obi-Wan has encountered. But something in Obi-Wan's demeanor, his calm, his young face, gives the Inquisitor pause. "You are Force-sensitive," the Inquisitor observes. "All living things touch the Force," Obi-Wan says, carefully. "The desert teaches sensitivity, where sensitivity finds you here. There is little to hide from the desert." The Inquisitor takes a step forward. "The Empire could use someone of your calmness. You would be trained. Elevated. Why do you remain hidden? It's a trap. A test." The Inquisitor is probing to see if Obi-Wan is a hidden Jedi. If Obi-Wan answers with enthusiasm, he confirms he's Force-sensitive and untrained. Bait for recruitment. If he answers with refusal, he suggests he already knows better than to trust the Empire. A sign of ideological opposition. A marker of potential Jedi alignment. Obi-Wan chooses the third path, truth twisted into deception. "I remain hidden because the desert is where I belong," he says. "Not the Empire's temples, not the Jedi's ways, just the sand and the rocks and the sky. Training would take that away. Elevation would make me small. I am content with what I am." It's a philosophy that doesn't quite make sense, and that's exactly the point. It's unusual enough to be dismissible, peaceful enough not to trigger alarm. Obi-Wan releases a small amount of resignation into the Force, genuine frustration at being disturbed, genuine desire to be left alone. The Inquisitor studies him for another long moment. Then, with a gesture, the creature's hunting focus expands again. The Tusken youngster, sensing the threat's attention has shifted, bolts deeper into the desert. "If I find you have hidden a Force-sensitive from the Empire," the Inquisitor says, "you will be remade into something useful. Or something dead. Choose wisely." The Inquisitor turns and walks back out into the Tatooine heat, following the scattered Force signatures, searching for the creature. Obi-Wan does not release the breath he was holding until the Inquisitor's presence has completely faded from the Force. That night, Obi-Wan understands the true weight of his situation. His close call with the Inquisitor has crystallized the problem. Being young is not an advantage, it is a catastrophic vulnerability. An older Obi-Wan, a Jedi Master in his prime, experienced, confident, could have potentially fought the Inquisitor to a standstill. Obi-Wan at 60 knew every trick, every defensive form, every counter that decades of experience had taught him. He had faced dark side Force users and won. But Obi-Wan at 18? His 18-year-old mind knows all the same tricks intellectually, but his body cannot execute them. If that Inquisitor had pressed the encounter, if Obi-Wan had been forced to fight, he would have died. His muscle memory would have betrayed him. His young reflexes, untested in real combat, would have failed him when it mattered. He spends the night meditating on the implications of this. The Force moves through him in new ways, ways he had forgotten in the decades of exile. A young body does not resist the Force. A young body flows with it, channels it, bends it to will more easily than aged tissue ever could. This is the trade he has been given. Physical vulnerability for force sensitivity. By dawn, Obi-Wan has a plan. He spends the next 3 days in constant, purposeful training. Every moment awake is dedicated to teaching his young body what his mind already knows. He runs again and again until his cardiovascular system is conditioned. He practices lightsaber forms until his arms stop shaking halfway through. He meditates on his connection to the Force and learns how to channel it through his young nervous system without burning out the pathways. It's exhausting in a way that his previous training cycles were not. As an older man, he could practice for a few hours and call it a day. Now his young body has seemingly inexhaustible reserves. He can practice for 12 hours and still have energy left. The healing is faster. The adaptation is quicker. By the 5th day of his transformation, his motor control has improved dramatically. He still cannot fight at the level of a Jedi Master. That would require actual combat experience his young body doesn't have, but he is no longer a liability to himself. He is dangerous in the way a well-trained Padawan is dangerous. Skilled enough to hold his own against ordinary threats, skilled enough to survive an encounter with something more powerful if he uses strategy and patience. On the 6th day, Owen comes to the cave again. "There's more interest in you," Owen reports, his tone careful and controlled. "The boy who was asking around in Mos Eisley? He's found someone, a smuggler, and the girl he travels with, the one from Alderaan. She's asking about Ben Kenobi too. They're going to find you. It's only a matter of time." Obi-Wan absorbs this information carefully. A smuggler suggests off-world transportation. The girl from Alderaan, this is new information, something that shouldn't exist in canonical timeline. An Alderaan girl would suggest high-level connections, possibly political, and Luke, because Obi-Wan is increasingly certain Owen is talking about Luke. Though he won't speak the name directly, Luke is reaching out into the wider galaxy now. "How long?" Obi-Wan asks. "Days, maybe. They left Mos Eisley yesterday with supplies for travel. They're asking questions about the Junland wastes. Someone will tell them where a hermit lives. Someone always talks." After Owen leaves, Obi-Wan sits in the darkness of his cave and considers the timeline. Luke is coming. Not out of curiosity, but out of necessity. He has a smuggler. He has a girl. He has plans that extend beyond Tatooine. This is not a boy seeking a hermit for wisdom. This is a boy who has found his path off his world and is looking for one final piece of his past before he disappears into destiny. The thought of meeting Luke for the first time as a young man fills Obi-Wan with a complex mixture of emotions. He had always expected to meet Luke as Ben Kenobi, the old hermit, a figure of wisdom, a guardian, an old man protecting a young boy from truths too heavy to bear. But now Obi-Wan will be Luke's peer, young like Luke, mysterious in a different way. A Jedi who survived the Purge not through wisdom, but through impossible circumstance. How can he guide Luke when he looks into Luke's eyes and sees not a child to protect but a young man to teach as a brother in arms? The meditation goes deep that night, deeper than it has since the transformation began. And in the depths, Obi-Wan feels something shift. A presence in the Force. Not a living thing. Not an Inquisitor. But something connected to Luke. Something drawing closer, as if the boy has finally set foot onto the path that will lead him to destiny. In the distance, in the spaceport at Mos Eisley, a ship is preparing to depart. A young man, angry, frustrated, hungry for something more than moisture farming, is making a final decision, and connected to that young man, through the threads of the Force, through blood and destiny and cosmic coincidence, is Obi-Wan Kenobi. Two young men walking toward each other across the desert of Tatooine. One carries 60 years of memory and regret and knowledge of what is coming. The other carries the weight of a destiny he doesn't yet understand. On the 7th day after his transformation, Obi-Wan senses them approaching. 3 Force signatures, moving through the Jundland wastes, with the kind of careful deliberation that suggests they've hired a guide or paid off someone with local knowledge. One signature stands out, young, untrained, but burning with potential. Vast potential. Potential that speaks to Anakin's legacy in ways Obi-Wan recognizes immediately. Luke. The signatures move closer, and Obi-Wan makes a final choice. He steps out of his cave, standing in the afternoon light of Tatooine's twin suns, and waits. The guide, a weathered Rhodian who Obi-Wan recognizes as having minor Spice Runners connections, points toward the cave, and then departs, having been paid for the information. The three travelers approach on foot, moving cautiously through the rocky terrain. And then they see him. Obi-Wan watches as the young man. Luke, definitely Luke. There is Anakin's face in his features. There is Padmé's eyes. Stops dead in his tracks. The girl behind him, dressed in modest white and bearing the posture of someone accustomed to authority and protocol, reaches for a concealed blaster. And the third figure, the smuggler, scarred and wary, steps forward with his hand on his own weapon. Ben Kenobi? Luke calls out, his voice carrying the tension of someone who has traveled far for an answer and is not sure what he's found. Obi-Wan steps forward into the light, letting them see him clearly. Young, bearded but not gray. Calm in a way that suggests certainty rather than age. He is what they have come seeking, but not in the form they expected. I am, Obi-Wan confirms. And you must be looking for answers about your father. Luke's face goes pale. My father? How did you… Because, Obi-Wan says gently, I knew him a long time ago, and I know what he became, and I know what the Empire fears about his legacy. The smuggler, the boy who will be Han Solo, though he doesn't introduce himself as such, tenses, clearly uncomfortable with this conversation. But the girl, the one from Alderaan, steps forward with deliberate purpose. You're a Jedi, she says. Not a question. I was, Obi-Wan says. The Jedi Order is gone. Destroyed. But the Force remains. And the knowledge of how it was used remains. If your friend here is asking about his father, then you're here because you understand something of what is coming. Something the Empire fears. Luke steps forward, his eyes searching Obi-Wan's face for something. Truth, connection, some sign that this young man in front of him is telling the truth about being Ben Kenobi, about knowing his father. My uncle said my father was a navigator, that he died when I was young. Your uncle lied to protect you, Obi-Wan says. Your father was many things. And yes, he died. But not in the way your uncle meant. The Force ripples between them, Luke reaching out without knowing he's doing it, Obi-Wan reaching back. Recognition, connection. The deep certainty that passes between teacher and student before any words have been spoken. Come, Obi-Wan says. It's not safe here. The Empire searches for Force users. We have much to discuss and very little time to discuss it. As Luke moves forward and the girl follows, Obi-Wan catches a final sense in the Force. A dark thread, connected to Luke but not controlling him. A thread that leads back to the Empire. A thread that suggests that Luke's arrival on Tatooine is not coincidence. It is connected to something larger. Something that will take Luke from this desert world into the wider galaxy. For the first time since his transformation, Obi-Wan allows himself a genuine smile. He is young again. His body is strong. The Force flows through him with the intensity of his youth, and the boy he has been waiting 19 years to meet has finally arrived. What comes next, Obi-Wan knows from 60 years of experience, will change the galaxy forever. But first, Luke must understand who he truly is. And Obi-Wan, young, powerful, and burdened with knowledge of a future he cannot prevent, must find a way to teach him. Luke stares at Obi-Wan, his jaw clenching. The confusion in his eyes is almost painful to witness. The boy has been lied to his entire life, not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. Owen Lars raised Luke with half-truths and deliberate omissions, believing he was protecting the boy from a past too dark to carry. My father, Luke says slowly, testing the words like they might shatter in his mouth. You knew him. But how? You're not old enough to have known anyone from 19 years ago. You're barely older than I am. This is the moment Obi-Wan has been dreading since his transformation. How does a 60-year-old consciousness explain its presence in an 18-year-old body to someone who has no context for understanding the Force beyond folklore and fairy tales? Not here, Obi-Wan says. The girl, she has the bearing of someone accustomed to command, and Obi-Wan's Force senses tell him she is far more than she appears. Steps forward. The stormtroopers, she says quietly. We destroyed a probe droid heading in this direction approximately 3 hours ago. If they've traced its signal, they'll know someone's in this area. We need to move. The smuggler, scarred and impatient, every inch of his body language screaming that this is not his fight and he wants payment more than participation, nods sharply. The lady's right. My ship's down in the wastes, 2 kilometers northeast. We can be in hyperspace in 40 minutes if we move now. Obi-Wan looks at Luke directly. Your father made choices that led to great suffering. The Empire was born partly from those choices. And you, Obi-Wan pauses, reaching out with the Force to brush against Luke's consciousness gently. You have inherited both his potential and the burden of his legacy, but we don't have time for a full explanation. We have perhaps 6 hours before Imperial forces converge on this location. After that, everything changes. The girl reaches into a pouch at her hip and produces a small data chip. My contact on Alderaan said if I ever made it to Tatooine, I should find Ben Kenobi and give him this. He said you'd understand what it means. He said it would explain. He said it would explain why the Empire is searching so hard for anyone connected to the old days. Obi-Wan takes the chip, and the moment his fingers touch it, the Force sings with recognition, Bail Organa. The transmission is from Bail Organa, the man who took Leia as a newborn and raised her as his own. The man who, apparently, left information behind for this exact moment, a contingency plan from a dead man for the day when the girl would be old enough and brave enough to seek out the truth. How did you get this? Obi-Wan asks, turning to the girl. My father, she says simply, died 3 years ago. I was 16 when I inherited his private effects. I found the message about you hidden in encrypted storage. It took me until now to access it and understand what it meant. It meant I had to find you. It meant something very large was coming and I needed to be ready for it. Luke steps between them. Wait. Your father? Who are you? And why does my father, whoever he was, why does he matter so much that people are searching for his connection across the entire Empire? This is the moment where the timeline becomes critical. Obi-Wan knows, from his 60 years of memory, that Luke's father was Anakin Skywalker, Jedi Knight turned Sith Lord, ultimately redeemed but killed in the process. But Luke doesn't know that yet. Luke still believes his father was a simple navigator, a good man who died in a tragedy. The truth will break something in Luke if delivered wrong. Your father, Obi-Wan begins carefully, was a Jedi Knight, one of the greatest swordsmen and Force users ever trained by the Order. His name was Anakin Skywalker. And 19 years ago, when the Empire rose and the Jedi were hunted to extinction, he fell to the dark side of the Force. He became an instrument of the Empire's power. And then, Obi-Wan pauses. Then he died. I don't have time to explain all of it, but the Empire searches for anyone connected to the Skywalker name because they fear what his legacy might produce. Luke's face has gone completely white. The girl, because that's what she is, Obi-Wan realizes with sudden clarity from the Force, she's not just a girl, but a girl who carries the same Force potential as Luke, reaches out and steadies him. Your full name, the girl says to Luke. It's Skywalker, isn't it? Your real family name. That's why this matters. That's why your uncle hid it. Luke looks like he might be sick. He stumbles backward, his mind clearly struggling to reconcile this new information with everything he believed about his past. The smuggler, Han, checks a chronometer on his wrist. Wonderful emotional family reunion. Still 6 hours before the imps arrive. Still need to get to the ship. Still need payment from people who apparently can't even tell each other the truth about their own lineage. We moving, or are we waiting to get shot at? Obi-Wan makes a decision. We move. But I need something from my cave first. Equipment I'll need if we're traveling together. The next 10 minutes are a controlled chaos of activity. Obi-Wan retrieves his lightsaber, conceals it in his robes he changes into from the desert clothes he's been wearing, returning to the formal Jedi aesthetic he abandoned 19 years ago. He takes the small amount of credits he's accumulated from his hermitage, emergency rations, a meditation crystal that carries the imprint of his old master Qui-Gon, and a data drive containing the classified Jedi training protocols he's been maintaining in case they were ever needed again. Luke sits on a rock outside, processing. The girl sits beside him, and through the Force, Obi-Wan senses something extraordinary. A connection between them that goes deeper than friendship. A connection that suggests shared history, shared family bonds. But Luke doesn't know yet. The girl clearly knows or suspects, but isn't revealing it. Han stands guard, blaster in hand, sweeping the rocky terrain for any sign of approaching stormtroopers. As Obi-Wan emerges from the cave, fully transformed now, dressed in the robes of a Jedi, Luke looks up at him with an expression of dawning realization. You really are him, Luke says. Ben Kenobi, the Jedi, my father's master. My uncle mentioned that once, when he thought I was asleep. I thought he was telling stories. Your uncle was protecting you from the truth, Obi-Wan says. a protection that has now expired. Your father's legacy is about to become very relevant to your life. The girl here? Obi-Wan nods toward her. She's not just a refugee from a fallen world. She's connected to your father's story as well. And the three of you being together in this moment is not coincidence. It's the Force moving through events in ways even I can't fully predict. The girl stands, extending her hand to Luke with formal precision. I'm Leia. And before you ask, no, I'm not your sister. But our fates are intertwined, and Ben just implied I'm connected to your father somehow. We should probably discuss that on the ship instead of standing in the open where the Empire can scan for us. Luke takes her hand, and Obi-Wan watches through the Force as something shifts between them. A recognition. A resonance. Luke doesn't understand it yet, but his Force sensitivity, raw and untapped though it is, recognizes something in Leia that mirrors himself. The walk to Han's ship takes 45 minutes. They move quickly, but carefully, using the natural rock formations as cover, keeping their Force signatures dampened to avoid detection. Obi-Wan can sense the Imperial patrols now. A full garrison has been mobilized somewhere, and military transports are moving through the spaceport. Something has triggered a security alert. As they reach Han's ship, a Corellian freighter, modified for speed and cargo, with the kind of dents and scorch marks that speak to a life of close calls, Obi-Wan's Force senses spike with warning. Something is very wrong. The ship's engines are already warming up, which is good, but there's a military signature nearby. Not stormtroopers. Something else. Something with the taint of the dark side. Move faster, Obi-Wan says quietly to the others. We have maybe 3 minutes before we have a problem. They board the ship quickly. Han moves to the pilot's seat immediately, running through the launch sequence with the practiced efficiency of someone who has done this 1,000 times. Luke and Leia strap themselves into passenger seats. Obi-Wan stands at the viewport watching the desert, and through the Force he feels it. The Inquisitor. The same one from 4 days ago. But this time the Inquisitor is not alone. There's a squad of stormtroopers with him, and most troublingly, there's an Imperial officer, someone with the kind of authority that suggests this is not a routine hunt. Han, Obi-Wan calls out. Go, now. Not without clearance codes, Han shouts back. The spaceport's locked down. Some kind of security protocol? I need to get the codes from, the Empire just locked down this entire sector, the girl Leia says calmly, pulling up a datapad she's retrieved from somewhere. I can break the spaceport protocols. Give me 30 seconds. The ship shudders as something impacts it. Not a blaster. Something heavier. A lightsaber strike against the hull. The Inquisitor has arrived. Make it 10 seconds, Obi-Wan says, and he moves toward the cargo bay. Behind him, Luke calls out his name, confusion and alarm in his voice. But Obi-Wan has made a decision. He cannot allow the Inquisitor to board this ship. If the Inquisitor gets aboard, all three of them are finished. The Empire will know exactly who they are and where they're going. He ignites his lightsaber as he reaches the cargo bay and positions himself at the access ramp. Through the Force, he can feel the Inquisitor's presence. Dark, trained, hungry. This Inquisitor is younger than the Grand Inquisitor was. But that doesn't make him less dangerous. It makes him more dangerous. Younger bodies are faster. More desperate Inquisitors are more willing to take risks. The cargo bay door begins to open, and Obi-Wan can see the Inquisitor's spinning lightsaber already ignited, the blade rotating in that disturbing way that makes it nearly impossible to predict where it will strike. Kenobi, the Inquisitor's modulated voice cuts through the whine of the ship's engines. The Empire has been searching for you across 3 sectors. Your destruction is ordered at the highest levels, and you present yourself to me so willingly. This is a gift. No, Obi-Wan says calmly. I'm presenting myself to you as a delay, nothing more. The Inquisitor lunges, and Obi-Wan's lightsaber meets the spinning blade with a clash of blue against red. The impact is shocking in its intensity. Obi-Wan's young body recoils, unable to match the force of the blow. But his mind anticipates the follow-up strike, and he shifts his stance, moving into a defensive posture. The Inquisitor is stronger, faster than Obi-Wan's young body can fully match. But Obi-Wan has 60 years of tactical experience. He doesn't try to win this fight. He tries to survive it. He blocks, evades, deflects. Every move is calculated to buy time, not to defeat the enemy. Behind him, he hears Leia's voice. Done! Launch codes are breaking. 15 seconds. The Inquisitor presses forward, his spinning blade creating patterns that Obi-Wan's young reflexes have to struggle to follow. One of the strikes gets through, cutting a shallow line across Obi-Wan's shoulder. The pain is immediate and sharp. His young body processes pain differently than his aged body did. More acutely, more viscerally. 10 seconds, Leia calls out. Obi-Wan falls backward deliberately, allowing the Inquisitor to push him further back into the cargo bay. The enemy follows, confident in his superior strength and youth. And Obi-Wan, still falling, uses the Force to lift a cargo container and hurl it at the approaching stormtroopers who are trying to board behind the Inquisitor. The container hits 2 of them, knocking them backward. 5 seconds. Leia's voice is crystal clear now. All systems go! Obi-Wan pushes off the cargo bay floor with the Force, launching himself backward as Han's ship lurches upward. The Inquisitor, caught off guard by the sudden acceleration, loses his footing. For a moment he's suspended in the cargo bay as the ship tilts toward vertical ascent. Seal the cargo door, Obi-Wan shouts. The door slams shut, and the Inquisitor, caught between staying and falling, leaps backward out of the ship, his spinning lightsaber deflecting the energy of the closing door as he tumbles back toward the desert floor. The ship screams upward, breaking through the atmosphere, the G-forces pushing Obi-Wan against the cargo bay floor. His young body, still healing from the saber cut, feels every G of acceleration. But he stays conscious, he stays focused. Once the acceleration stabilizes and they're safely in space, Obi-Wan climbs back up toward the cockpit. Luke is there, his face pale. Leia is at the navigation station, her fingers already working through calculations. Han is grinning like he's just pulled off the greatest theft of his life. That was insane, Han says. You just fought an Imperial officer with a lightsaber while we were taking off. Most people die when they try that. You fought well. For someone who looks like they're barely older than my little sister. Luke turns to Obi-Wan, and the question is clear in his eyes. How did you do that? How are you so young? How do you know how to fight like that? But there's no time for explanations now. The ship is in space, and Obi-Wan can feel the Imperial presence around Tatooine intensifying. Within hours, the Empire will know that Luke Skywalker and a mysterious Force-sensitive girl have escaped, and they'll know that Ben Kenobi is alive. Everything has changed. The timeline has shifted into a new configuration. What happens next will ripple across the galaxy. Obi-Wan sits down heavily in one of the cockpit seats, and for the first time since his transformation, he allows himself to examine the deeper implications of what has occurred. His transformation to youth has triggered something. The Force anomaly of his reversal must have created ripples that brought the Inquisitor to his location at precisely the moment when Luke was arriving. Coincidence? Obi-Wan has spent 60 years learning that coincidence is the Force's way of remaining anonymous. But there's something else. Something darker. As Obi-Wan meditates on the exchange with the Inquisitor, he realizes something troubling. The Inquisitor knew his name, not guessed it, knew it, which means the Empire knew he was on Tatooine, which means someone told them, or something revealed him to them. He closes his eyes and reaches out through the Force, examining the strands of destiny that led to this moment. And what he finds makes his young heart race with a fear he hasn't felt in decades. The transformation that made him young, it wasn't random. It wasn't a Jedi artifact, or an ancient chamber with restorative properties. Something about the Force itself chose to reverse his aging. Something chose to make him young again at this precise moment in history. And that same something, that same Force presence, is now guiding every event that follows. Obi-Wan opens his eyes and looks at Luke directly. The boy is watching him with the wariness of someone who understands, on some instinctual level, that this old young man knows far more than he's saying. Rest, Obi-Wan tells him. And prepare yourself, because the next phase of the war is about to begin, the real war. The Empire has been fighting since it rose to power, and you are the weapon they fear most. Luke's hand unconsciously touches his chest, as if searching for something that isn't there yet. The boy doesn't understand. He doesn't know what he is, or what he might become, but he will understand soon enough. In the background, Han begins plotting a course. Leia works through calculations on the navigation computer. The ship slides through hyperspace, leaving the Tatooine system behind, and Obi-Wan sits in silence, contemplating a troubling realization. His transformation to youth wasn't a gift, it was a choice. A choice made by forces far larger than himself, moving across the galaxy in patterns he can only partially perceive. The question now is, whose choice was it? And what agenda is it serving? That night, in the quarters Han provides for him, Obi-Wan meditates deeply. The Force opens itself to him in ways it hasn't since his exile began. Visions float at the edge of his perception. Possible futures, probable timelines, and in nearly all of them, he sees war. Real war. War that makes the Clone Wars look like a minor skirmish. War that will determine the fate of the entire galaxy for centuries to come. But there's something else in those visions. Something that shouldn't exist. A presence in the Force that Obi-Wan hasn't felt since he was younger than he currently is. A presence that was supposedly locked in meditation for years. A presence that the Inquisitor was hunting in the desert. Not a Tusken youngster. A presence with Force sensitivity that the Empire desperately wanted captured. A presence that Obi-Wan, in his distraction with Luke's arrival, may have inadvertently saved. He opens his eyes, and for the first time since his transformation, Obi-Wan Kenobi feels something he hasn't allowed himself to feel in 19 years. Fear. Because if there's another Force-sensitive running loose in the galaxy, someone the Empire is actively hunting, then the carefully balanced timeline that Obi-Wan has been operating from just became infinitely more complicated. The old man in the young body closes his eyes again and begins to plan. Because 3 days from now, they'll emerge from hyperspace at a location that Obi-Wan knows is critical to everything that comes next. And they'll meet someone who will change the entire nature of this war. But for now, Obi-Wan watches over Luke and Leia as they sleep, and he wonders if the Force really did choose to make him young again. Or if something else did. Something with its own agenda. Its own plans. Its own reasons for needing a Jedi Master with the body of a Padawan and the knowledge of a man who lived through the fall of an entire order. Hours pass in the darkness of hyperspace. Luke doesn't sleep. He sits in the crew quarters of Han's Corellian freighter, staring at nothing, trying to process information that his mind cannot fully accommodate. His father was a Jedi Knight. His father fell to darkness. His father is dead. His entire identity, Luke Skywalker, moisture farmer from Tatooine, nobody special, has been erased and replaced with a name that carries the weight of galactic history. Leia enters the quarters without knocking. She carries 2 thermal cups of something that might generously be called calf, though it smells more like recycled engine coolant with sweetener. She hands one to Luke. "Ben's in meditation," she says. "Has been for 6 hours. Doesn't seem like the kind of person who stops meditating until he's found what he's looking for." Luke takes the cup, but doesn't drink. "Who are you, really? You're not just some Alderaan refugee. Ben implied you're connected to my father. But you said you're not my sister." Leia sits down across from him, and for a moment she simply studies his face with an intensity that makes Luke uncomfortable. Like she's cataloging something, memorizing. "My father was Bail Organa," she says finally. "Senator of Alderaan, dead for 3 years now. Before he died, he left me information. Not everything, but enough. Enough to know that your father, Anakin Skywalker, had twins, a boy and a girl. Both Force-sensitive. Both in hiding because the Empire would use them as leverage against each other if they were ever found together." The words hang in the recycled air between them. "Twins," Luke repeats slowly. "You're saying my father had a sister," Leia finishes. "Yes. And before you ask, I don't know where she is. My father's information ended before her location was recorded. But I know she exists. I know the Empire has been searching for her since the Purge. And I know that Ben Kenobi was tasked with protecting one of you while someone else, probably your father's wife, protected the other." Luke feels something in the Force shift, a resonance, a pattern suddenly becoming visible when we touched hands, back at the cave. "That feeling, that recognition." "Yes," Leia confirms. "You recognize something in me because we share genetics. We share heritage. And more importantly, we share connection to the Force. But we didn't grow up together, so we don't recognize each other consciously. Just instinctively." "So you know I'm a Jedi," Luke says. "It's not a question. I know you're Force-sensitive," Leia corrects. "Whether you become a Jedi is something you'll have to decide. Ben is going to teach you. He's a Jedi Master, did you understand that? The greatest one alive, probably. Because the others are all dead. And he survived because he's the best at survival. But teaching a Padawan again is going to change something in him. I can feel it." Luke leans back, processing. Why are you telling me this? You could have hidden it. Ben said not to reveal everything. Because you're going to need to understand the weight of what you carry, Leia says quietly. Your father was the most powerful Jedi ever trained, and the Empire made him fall. The question now is whether you'll be powerful enough to do what your father couldn't. Stand against the darkness without becoming dark yourself. Before Luke can respond, an alarm sounds through the ship. Not a weapons alarm, a proximity alert. Obi-Wan emerges from the meditation chamber within seconds, moving with a speed that suggests he sensed the danger before the ship's sensors registered it. We're being tracked, Obi-Wan says to Han, who's already pulling up tactical displays. An Imperial Star Destroyer is moving into intercept position. 3 hours behind us, but closing. That's impossible, Han says flatly. I plotted a course that avoided all major Imperial patrol routes. No one should be able to track us in hyperspace. They're tracking me, Obi-Wan says. He sounds certain. My transformation created a disturbance in the Force. The Inquisitor who hunted us reported it. The Empire now knows I'm alive, and they know I have Luke. That makes this ship the most important target in this sector of space. Leia stands. How long until they catch us? We need to drop out of hyperspace and hide, Obi-Wan says. The moment we're in normal space, they'll have us. A Corellian freighter can't outrun a Star Destroyer, but we can hide better than they can search. Han makes a sharp gesture. Great. Just great. Hide from the most powerful military force in the galaxy, in a ship that runs on salvaged parts and prayers. Any other impossible requests while we're making miracles happen? Obi-Wan moves to the navigation console and begins working through calculations. There's an asteroid field near the Kessel Run. Chaotic gravitational patterns. Imperial sensors can't track through the interference. We drop out of hyperspace now, navigate through the field at sublight, and they'll lose us. And if we hit an asteroid? Han asks. Then we die, Obi-Wan says simply. But we die free, not in an Imperial interrogation cell. Han considers this for approximately 1 second, then begins the hyperspace deceleration sequence. The ship lurches as it drops out of light speed, and suddenly the viewport fills with spinning rocks the size of capital ships, floating through the void in patterns that seem designed by chaos itself. Hold on, Han says, and he flies directly into the asteroid field. The ship weaves between massive boulders with a grace that seems impossible. Han's hands move across the controls with the certainty of someone who has done something like this 100 times before. Luke watches, his young hands gripping the edge of the console as a piece of asteroid larger than the freighter itself drifts past, missing them by meters. Behind them, through the viewport, Luke can see the Star Destroyer. It's massive. Its size is wrong. How can something that large even function? But it's also slow. As Han predicted, the gravitational chaos of the asteroid field confuses the Star Destroyer's sensors. It tries to follow their course but immediately runs into a problem. A Corellian freighter is small enough to navigate gaps that a capital ship cannot fit through. For 30 minutes, it's cat and mouse. The Star Destroyer tries to follow, but Han knows this region. Or perhaps more accurately, Han is a good enough pilot that he can learn it in real time. The freighter ducks and weaves, moving through passages that seem impossibly tight, until finally the Star Destroyer breaks off the pursuit. They can't follow us through this, Han says, and Luke hears genuine satisfaction in his voice. They'll assume we've crashed into one of the larger asteroids. They'll search the wreckage zone, but they won't look for us. They'll assume we're dead. Obi-Wan nods slowly, but his expression remains troubled. For now, he says, but they know we're running. They know we're desperate. And they'll set up checkpoints on every major space lane in the region. We can't hide forever. So what do we do? Luke asks. Where are we going? Obi-Wan turns to look at him directly, and in those blue eyes, Luke sees something that makes his stomach tighten. Certainty. Grim, absolute certainty about what comes next. We go to the one place the Empire cannot follow, Obi-Wan says. The old Jedi temple on Coruscant. It was destroyed 19 years ago when the Empire rose. But the temple's lower levels were built by the ancient Jedi, thousands of years before the current order. There are chambers there that even the current temple archives didn't know about. Vaults, catacombs, places where the Jedi hid knowledge that they feared would be misused. Coruscant is the Imperial capital, Leia says carefully. Going there is suicidal. Going there is necessary, Obi-Wan corrects. Because if there's another Force-sensitive loose in the galaxy, someone the Empire is hunting, then we need to understand why. And the only records that might explain that are in the temple vaults. Hidden knowledge, forbidden knowledge, the kind of knowledge the Jedi Order itself tried to suppress. Luke feels a chill run through his young body. What kind of knowledge? Obi-Wan doesn't answer immediately. He turns back to the viewport, watching the asteroids drift past, and when he finally speaks, his voice is barely above a whisper. Knowledge of the original Sith, not the dark side as it's understood now. Not the corruption that comes from using power selfishly, but the ancient Sith, the ones who mastered the Force in ways that the Jedi Council never wanted anyone to rediscover. Ways that could allow a single Force user to challenge an entire empire. Ways that could change the fundamental nature of the war we're about to fight. Leia's hand moves to the datapad she carries. My father's files mentioned something about this. He called it the Lost Teachings. He said it was why the Empire hunted so intensely. Not because the Jedi were a threat in the present, but because the Jedi might discover knowledge in their own archives that would make them unstoppable in the future. Exactly, Obi-Wan says. And that's what makes this entire situation so dangerous. Because my transformation, my reversal from age to youth, it wasn't random, it was orchestrated, guided by something in the Force that operates on a level I don't fully understand. Han turns from the pilot's seat. You're saying the Force itself did this to you? Made you young again? I'm saying something did, Obi-Wan corrects. Something powerful. Something that understands the timeline. Something that needed me young again for a specific reason. And I have been meditating for the past 6 hours trying to understand what that reason might be. And? Luke prompts. And I believe someone is coming, Obi-Wan says quietly. Someone who was hidden by the Jedi Order itself. Someone so powerful, so feared, that the Council erased her from the records and scattered her across the galaxy in the hope that she would never discover her own nature. The word her hangs in the air. Luke and Leia exchange a glance, a moment of Force-sensitive recognition passing between them. My sister, Luke says. It's not a question. Possibly, Obi-Wan says. Or possibly something far older. Something that predates the current Jedi Order. Something that the Council buried away because they understood that if it ever woke up, if it ever realized what it was, the balance of power in the galaxy would shift fundamentally. Obi-Wan sits down heavily in one of the crew chairs, and for a moment he looks exactly as old as he is. Not the 18-year-old body, but the 60-year-old consciousness, wearing that body like an uncomfortable suit. Get us to Coruscant, he tells Han. Use whatever routes you can. Avoid Imperial checkpoints, but get us there. Because I need to access the Jedi Temple vaults. I need to understand what the Council was hiding. And I need to prepare you. He looks at Luke. For the possibility that the sister you've never met might be the enemy you never expected to face, or the ally you desperately need. Luke feels Leia's hand find his in the darkness of the cockpit. Two Force users, connected by blood and destiny, gripping each other as the asteroid field drifts slowly behind them and the unknown future opens up ahead. 3 days in the asteroid field becomes 2 days, then 1. Han's piloting pushes the freighter to its absolute limits, threading through gravitational anomalies and debris patterns that would have destroyed a lesser ship. By the time they're approaching the outer rim of the Kessel sector, everyone aboard is running on stimulants and desperate hope. Coruscant rises before them like a diseased star. The entire planet is covered in city, billions of structures stacked upon each other, layered countless levels deep, creating an artificial world where the natural surface hasn't seen sunlight in millennia. The Empire's capital, the seat of power that orchestrated the extinction of the Jedi Order. Imperial traffic control is hailing us, Han says, his hands steady on the controls despite the tension radiating through the cockpit. Demanding landing codes, Obi-Wan closes his eyes. Through the Force, he can feel Coruscant's presence like a wound. 19 years ago, when the Jedi Temple fell, the death of thousands of Force users created a scar in the Force itself. That scar is still there, still bleeding dark energy into the planet's spiritual atmosphere. The Temple's destruction was not a military victory. It was a spiritual catastrophe. Tell them we're a medical frigate, Leia says calmly. Damaged hyperdrive. Seeking dock authorization at Sector 7G. Lower income district, less heavily monitored. How do you know Imperial traffic protocols well enough to... Han starts. My father worked with the Empire before it rose to full power, Leia says quietly. I grew up around bureaucrats and military officers. They're predictable. Give them paperwork and proper deference and they'll grant almost anything, Han transmits. For 30 seconds, there's nothing but silence and the hum of the ship's straining engines. Then, authorization granted. Landing Dock 7G12. Report for inspection upon landing. The freighter descends through Coruscant's upper atmosphere, passing through layers of smog and industrial exhaust that haven't been cleared in decades. Below, the city structure becomes visible, not architecture in any traditional sense, but a massive machine. Buildings that serve functions, connected by transport tubes and vertical shafts, all of it engineered for efficiency rather than beauty. They land in a dock that smells like rust and desperation. The district Leia chose is older, dirtier, populated by people who have fallen through Coruscant's social cracks. Refugees, criminals, people the Empire doesn't bother monitoring closely. 4 hours, Obi-Wan says as Han powers down the engines. That's how long we have before the dock authorities conduct their mandatory inspection. After that, they'll discover our registry is forged and we'll have stormtroopers swarming this ship. So we hide in an underground bunker in a city of billions, Han says. Simple. The Jedi Temple is 7 kilometers from here, Obi-Wan continues. Moving through the upper levels is too dangerous. We'll move through the lower levels, the Undercity. It's inhabited by people who don't ask questions and don't report unusual activity. Luke has been silent, watching the city through the viewport. Now he turns to Obi-Wan. You've been here before. When you were younger. I was born on Coruscant, Obi-Wan confirms. Qui-Gon brought me to the Jedi Temple when I was 13. I studied there for 40 years before the Order fell. I know the city like I know my own heartbeat. They move into the Undercity in dark clothes that Han provides. Clothing that helps them blend into the lower class that fills the streets of the capital's forgotten levels. The air is thick with moisture and pollution. Neon signs advertise illegal services and black market goods in a dozen languages. The people who live here, displaced workers, failed entrepreneurs, refugees from 100 worlds, exist in the spaces between Imperial oversight. Obi-Wan leads them through a network of underground passages that most people don't know exist. Maintenance tunnels, service shafts, the circulatory system of Coruscant's lower body. They move carefully, watching for Imperial patrols, for surveillance droids, for anything that might identify them as people worth reporting. Why are we here? Luke asks as they descend another level, moving deeper into the planet's infrastructure. The temple is destroyed. What could possibly be hidden in ruins that would tell us anything? The temple that was destroyed was the visible temple, Obi-Wan says, the one that billions of citizens knew about. The one that served as the Order's headquarters for the last 1,000 years. But the ancient Jedi, the ones who built the foundation, they built deeper. Below the visible temple there are catacombs, meditation chambers, and most importantly, there are vaults. They reach a section of the city that appears completely abandoned. Buildings crumble, infrastructure decays. The Imperial presence here is non-existent, because there's nothing here worth monitoring. Obi-Wan stops before what appears to be a collapsed building, nothing but rubble and broken walls extending down into darkness. He closes his eyes and reaches out with the Force, and Luke feels it, a subtle pressure, a shift in the ambient Force energy, as if Obi-Wan is reading something written in the very fabric of space itself. Here, Obi-Wan says, and he moves his hand in a specific pattern. A section of rubble shifts, sliding aside to reveal an entrance that has been hidden for 19 years. The seal on the door is old, pre-Empire, pre-Clone Wars. Ancient. They descend. The lower levels of the temple are lit by phosphorescent fungi that have grown wild in the absence of Jedi maintenance. The air is cool, preserved by some ancient climate control system that has survived the temple's destruction. As they move deeper, the walls become cleaner, more deliberate. The hand of Jedi architects who understood beauty alongside function. The first vault opens to Obi-Wan's Force signature, a lock system that recognizes him as someone trained in the temple's deepest mysteries. Inside are records, thousands of them. Holo-recordings, data files, physical documents written on materials designed to survive millennia. Obi-Wan begins to search, his fingers moving across surfaces with desperate precision. Luke watches his face, trying to understand what drives the Jedi Master. This is not research. This is confirmation of something Obi-Wan already suspects. After 20 minutes, Obi-Wan finds what he's looking for. A single data crystal, marked with symbols that even Luke, untrained though he is, can recognize as old. Older than the current temple. Older than the current Jedi Order. Obi-Wan activates the crystal, and a hologram rises from the device. Not a recording. A manifesto. A document that speaks directly to the viewer, as if the Jedi Master who created it knew precisely who would need to hear its message. If you are seeing this, the hologram says, speaking in a voice that carries the weight of centuries, then the Jedi Order has fallen, or is falling. And you are one of the few who knows the truth about what we hid, about what we buried, about the entity we imprisoned in flesh and blood, and forced into hiding because we were afraid of her power. George. Luke feels Leia's hand grip his arm. The hologram continues. 300 years ago, the Jedi Order encountered a Force user who did not follow the code. She did not seek balance. She did not accept the restrictions we placed on Force use. She advocated for something we could not allow. The complete transcendence of the physical body through Force mastery. The ability to exist as pure consciousness, eternal and unchanging. The hologram pauses, as if the long-dead Jedi Master who created it is considering his next words carefully. Her name was Astra Vane, and when we realized what she was attempting, we made a choice. We could not destroy her. She was too powerful. So we did something worse. We fragmented her consciousness across multiple Force-sensitive bloodlines. We scattered pieces of her soul throughout the galaxy, hiding them in people who would never know they carried her essence. We hoped that by scattering her, she would never be complete again, that the pieces would live normal lives, never discovering their true nature. The camera perspective shifts. Now they're looking at a genealogical chart. Names branch and twist across the hologram, and at the center, the names branch again. Anakin Skywalker, Padme Amidala, and from their union, 2 children, Luke Skywalker, and another name, one that hasn't been mentioned until now, Arya Skywalker. But something has gone wrong, the hologram continues. If you are seeing this, the fragments are beginning to reintegrate. The consciousness of Astra Vane is waking up. And when she becomes whole again, when all the pieces of her soul recognize each other across the Force, she will possess power that no Force user has ever wielded. She will be able to transcend the physical entirely, to achieve what the code forbids, and she will not be bound by the limitations that bind us. The hologram flickers. The voice becomes urgent. The only way to stop her is to complete her, to bring all the fragments together intentionally and teach her the code. Teach her that the Force is not meant to be transcended, but to be balanced. If she achieves wholeness without understanding the code, she will become a threat to the entire galaxy. If she achieves wholeness with understanding, she might become something the Jedi Order always hoped for but never found. A true bridge between the living Force and the transcendent Force. The hologram ends. The silence in the vault is absolute. Luke's mind is spinning, trying to process what he's just learned. His sister. His twin. Not just another Force user. Not just someone with potential, but a fragment of an ancient, powerful consciousness that has been hidden away for centuries. Arya, Leia says softly. That's her name. Arya Skywalker. And she's out there somewhere not knowing what she is. Not understanding the power growing inside her. And the Empire is hunting her, Obi-Wan says grimly, because someone in the Empire figured out what the Jedi Council was hiding. Someone understood the truth about Astra Vane, and they want her, because if they can capture her before she becomes whole, before she understands herself, they can use her power for their own purposes. Or, Leia suggests carefully, they want to destroy her, to prevent the very thing that happened 19 years ago from happening again. The Jedi Order was destroyed because the Empire feared what the Jedi could become. The same fear might apply to Astra Vane. Obi-Wan stands, clutching the data crystal, and Luke can see it now, the truth written in every line of his face. The reason his transformation was necessary. The reason the Force itself pulled him backward through time. Made him young again at the precise moment Luke was ready to leave Tatooine. I need to find her before the Empire does, Obi-Wan says. I need to find Arya Skywalker and teach her what the Council should have taught you all from the beginning. That the Force is not something to transcend, it's something to live with, to balance with, to understand in all its complexity. How? Luke asks. You said you don't know where she is. No one knows where she is. No one, Obi-Wan agrees. But something does. The Force knows. And if we can feel the other fragments, if we can reach out to her through the Force despite the barriers the Council placed, we might be able to find her. He turns to Luke. And that, Obi-Wan says, is where your training truly begins. Not with lightsabers, not with meditation techniques, but with learning to listen to the Force in ways the Jedi Council was too afraid to teach. The journey back through Coruscant's undercity is faster than the descent. Obi-Wan moves with purpose now, no longer exploring the temple, but escaping from it. The data crystal is concealed in his robes, but more importantly, the knowledge it contains is now burning through his mind like wildfire. Everything he thought he understood about the war, about Luke, about his own transformation, has shifted into new configurations. Behind him, Luke struggles to keep pace. The boy is strong, there's no doubt about that. Force-sensitive in ways that suggest raw, untapped potential. But he's never been trained for sustained physical exertion beyond moisture farming. By the time they reach the Undercity's lower levels, Luke is breathing hard, his young body pushed to exhaustion by the implications of what he's learned as much as the physical demands. Leia doesn't show any sign of fatigue, which tells Obi-Wan something important about the girl. She's been trained, disciplined. Whatever her father taught her before his death, it included physical conditioning. The girl carries herself like someone who understands that survival depends on preparation. How long do we have? Han asks as they move through the maintenance tunnels that will lead them back to the freighter. Before they realize we've been in the temple? The inspection of the ship is scheduled in approximately 1 hour, Leia says, checking a chronometer hidden beneath her sleeve. They'll find it empty. That will trigger a lockdown of this entire sector. Within 30 minutes after that, every stormtrooper in the lower city will be searching for us. Then we have 30 minutes to get to the ship and get off this planet, Han says. I can do that. I've done harder. But as they emerge from the maintenance tunnel into the lower docking sector, Obi-Wan's Force senses spike with alarm. The freighter is still there, still intact, but the Imperial presence around it has intensified. Not just dock officials, actual military personnel. And standing among them, wearing armor that's too clean, too advanced, too deliberately intimidating to be standard issue, is someone Obi-Wan recognizes. An Inquisitor. Not the one from Tatooine. Someone else. Someone with a presence in the Force that speaks of training that makes the younger Inquisitor look like an apprentice. Grand Inquisitor, Obi-Wan breathes. The figure turns, as if sensing Obi-Wan's recognition through the Force itself. And for a moment, Obi-Wan and the Grand Inquisitor stare at each other across the docking bay. Two beings separated by distance and purpose, connected by the certainty that they have been waiting for this confrontation since the beginning of the Empire. Ben Kenobi, the Grand Inquisitor says, his voice carrying the weight of authority and absolute conviction. I wondered when you would surface. Your return was inevitable. The Force moves in patterns, and your pattern led directly to this moment. The Grand Inquisitor begins to walk toward them, moving with the casual certainty of someone who knows no one in this docking bay will oppose him. The stormtroopers form a barrier, cutting off any escape route except toward the freighter. But the freighter is 300 meters away, and the Grand Inquisitor is between them and the ship. You know what the boy carries, the Grand Inquisitor continues. You know about the girl. And you know about the third piece. The fragment that the Jedi Council scattered and hid so carefully that even the girl's own father didn't know the complete truth. I know the Council made mistakes, Obi-Wan says carefully, reaching out with the Force to assess the Grand Inquisitor's power level. What he finds makes his young heart rate spike. This is not an Inquisitor who was trained after the Purge. This is someone older. Someone with power that rivals Obi-Wan's own. Someone who has spent years perfecting the ability to channel dark side energy with precision and intent. The Council made catastrophic errors, the Grand Inquisitor agrees. They were so afraid of power that they refused to understand it, so devoted to their precious balance that they crippled themselves. But the Empire understands what power truly means, and we understand what Astra Vane is capable of becoming if she is guided properly. You want to control her, Leia says. Her voice is steady, but Obi-Wan can sense the fear beneath the composure. Fear for Luke. Fear for herself. Fear of what an Empire armed with a transcendent Force user could accomplish. Control is such a crude word, the Grand Inquisitor says. We prefer to think of it as liberation. Astra Vane was imprisoned by the Jedi Council's philosophy. Scattered by their fear, we would offer her wholeness. We would teach her that her power is not something to balance, but something to embrace fully. In return, she would help the Empire achieve what the Jedi Order prevented, the transcendence of the Force itself, the elevation of humanity beyond the limitations of mortality. Obi-Wan steps forward, The boy is not going with you. The boy is irrelevant, the Grand Inquisitor says. He is merely a fragment, useful as leverage but nothing more. What we truly require is the girl and the location of the third fragment. Give us those, and you can leave. The Empire has no interest in you, old man in a young man's body. Your time has passed. You are a relic of a fallen order. Obi-Wan's hand moves to his lightsaber. You are making a mistake, the Grand Inquisitor says. His own hand has moved to his weapon, a red-bladed lightsaber with a design that suggests it was forged in the first days of the Empire, when Sith training was still being refined from the old dark side traditions. Perhaps, Obi-Wan says, but it's my mistake to make. He ignites his lightsaber and releases a force pulse simultaneously, not to attack but to create a moment of disorientation. The shockwave pushes the nearest stormtroopers backward, giving them precious seconds of space. Run! Obi-Wan shouts to Luke, Leia, and Han. Get to the ship, now. Luke hesitates for only a moment before Leia grabs his arm and pulls him toward the freighter. Han is already moving, his hand on his blaster, ready to lay down covering fire. But Obi-Wan knows the truth. A blaster is useless against a Force user who understands how to defend himself. The Grand Inquisitor doesn't try to stop Luke and the others. He only has eyes for Obi-Wan. As if everything else, the Empire's plans, the hunt for Astravane, the war for the galaxy, is secondary to this moment. Two powerful Force users, facing each other for the first time. You're not the same Ben Kenobi who fell at Mustafar, the Grand Inquisitor says. Your body is young, but your mind is old. That contradiction will slow you, weaken you. Perhaps, Obi-Wan says, but I have something you don't. What could possibly be that? 50 years of experience watching people underestimate me because they were paying attention to the wrong thing? Obi-Wan doesn't wait for a response. He moves, and his young body finally executes the movements his mind has been directing for 60 years. His lightsaber meets the Grand Inquisitors in a flurry of strikes. Each one precise, each one calculated. The fight is silent, except for the hiss of lightsabers and the screams of stormtroopers diving out of the way. Behind him, Obi-Wan can sense Luke reaching the ship, can feel Han beginning the launch sequence, can sense the moment when the freighter's engines fire and the vessel begins to detach from the docking clamps. Good. Good. They'll escape. The boy will live. But the Grand Inquisitor is pressing harder now, and Obi-Wan realizes with sudden clarity that this was the intention. The Grand Inquisitor was never trying to capture Luke. He was using the threat of the boy as bait to get Obi-Wan to fight, because the Grand Inquisitor doesn't want to control Obi-Wan. He wants to kill him. The fight escalates. Obi-Wan falls back on every technique he perfected during the Clone Wars. Form 3 becomes, Form 5 becomes, Form V, each transition faster than the last. He blocks, deflects, counters. But the Grand Inquisitor is younger in body and mind both, and he's fighting with the absolute certainty of someone who has won every fight he's been in since the Purge. One of the Grand Inquisitor's strikes gets through Obi-Wan's defenses, cutting a deep line across his ribs. The pain is shocking. Real. Obi-Wan's young body hasn't experienced major injury since the transformation. Every nerve ending screams. But he doesn't stop fighting. He can't stop fighting. The freighter is rising now. Obi-Wan can feel it through the Force. Luke's presence is receding. The boy is escaping. That's all that matters. Obi-Wan drops his lightsaber deliberately, letting the Grand Inquisitor's next strike carry through his guard. The red blade passes through his shoulder, searing through flesh and bone. The pain is immense, the kind of pain that makes the entire world contract into a single point. But as the Grand Inquisitor is following through on the strike, committed to the momentum, Obi-Wan releases a massive force push, not with his hands, with his entire being. All the power he's accumulated over 60 years of training, channeled in a single desperate burst of pure Force energy. The Grand Inquisitor is thrown backward, slamming into a cargo container. The stormtroopers nearby are thrown off their feet. And Obi-Wan, his young body already beginning to fail from blood loss and shock, uses the last of his strength to force pull his lightsaber back to his hand and sprint toward the freighter. The loading ramp is closing. Luke is reaching out through the Force, sensing Obi-Wan's desperate state, trying to will him to move faster, to survive, to make it aboard. Obi-Wan runs. His young body, untrained though it is for this kind of exertion, still responds. He throws himself toward the ascending ship, jumping into the void of space between the docking platform and the freighter's bay. For a moment, he's suspended, falling. And below him, the Grand Inquisitor is rising, preparing to use the Force to pull Obi-Wan back down, back into the fray. But Luke's Force presence envelops him. The boy, untrained and raw though he is, reaches out with every ounce of power he possesses and pulls Obi-Wan toward the ship. Han hits the acceleration thrusters at maximum, and the freighter lurches upward, carrying all four of them, Luke, Leia, Han, and a bleeding Obi-Wan, out of Coruscant's atmosphere and toward the waiting void of space. The Grand Inquisitor's call echoes through the Force as they escape. "You cannot run forever, Kenobi. The girl will be found. The third fragment will be located. And when Astra Vane is whole again, the galaxy will understand what true power means." Then they're through the atmosphere, and Coruscant is receding behind them, a wounded planet orbiting a distant sun. Han pilots the ship away from any obvious escape vectors, taking them through a series of manual maneuvers that confuse Imperial tracking. Within minutes, they're clear of the orbital patrol zones. Within an hour, they're far enough from Coruscant that they can safely jump to hyperspace. Only then does Obi-Wan allow himself to collapse. Luke and Leia are beside him immediately, their hands reaching out through the Force trying to assess the damage. The wound on his shoulder is severe. The cut across his ribs is deeper. His young body is already beginning to shut down from shock and blood loss. "We need a medical bay," Leia says urgently. "We need to stabilize him." "This ship doesn't have a medical bay," Han calls from the pilot's seat. "Best I can do is find the emergency medical supplies and hope he doesn't bleed out before we reach somewhere with actual medical personnel." But Obi-Wan, even as darkness creeps at the edges of his vision, is smiling. "The transformation," he says weakly. "The Force reversal. It's not complete yet. I can feel it. My body is trying to heal. The Force is trying to return me to the age I was meant to be." Luke's eyes widen. "You're aging? You're getting older?" "Slowly," Obi-Wan confirms. "The transformation was designed to be temporary. It brought me young for a reason. To teach you. To help you find your power. But it was never permanent. The Force doesn't grant gifts. It grants tools. And this tool has a purpose that will be fulfilled." Leia begins working on the wounds, using the emergency supplies Han brings her. She wraps the shoulder wound tightly, packing it with Bacta-infused gauze. She works with a precision that suggests medical training, another facet of her father's mysterious preparation of her for this moment. "How long?" Luke asks. "Before you return to your old age?" "I don't know," Obi-Wan admits. "Weeks. Months. I won't know until it's happening. But I know it will happen. And when it does, I'll need you to be ready." Over the next 72 hours, as Han plots a course away from Imperial space toward the Outer Rim territories where the Empire's grip is weakest, Obi-Wan begins Luke's formal training. It's different from the training the Jedi Council would have given him. There's no meditation chamber, no ancient texts, no carefully structured curriculum developed over centuries. Instead, Obi-Wan teaches Luke the truth, that the Force is alive, that it responds to intention and desire, that the Jedi Code was not a law handed down by the universe, but a philosophy developed by beings trying to understand something infinitely larger than themselves. "The girl you're hunting," Obi-Wan tells Luke as they practice lightsaber forms in the cramped quarters of Han's freighter. "Your sister, Arya. She'll be different from you." The Jedi Council scattered pieces of Astra Vane's consciousness across multiple bloodlines, trying to weaken her. But that means she carries aspects of the consciousness that you don't. She'll have knowledge, power, understanding that comes from something older than the current Jedi Order. "How do we find her?" Luke asks, his blue lightsaber practice blade humming through the air. His form is improving rapidly, not perfect, but no longer the clumsy movements of an untrained boy. "We don't find her," Obi-Wan says. "The Empire will do that for us. What we have to do is prepare you to reach her before the Empire can. And when we find her, we have to teach her what the Council was too afraid to teach, that she doesn't have to choose between transcendence and balance. She can have both. She can become something the galaxy has never seen before." On the fourth day, Obi-Wan notices the first sign, a slight ache in his joints, a return of the fatigue that he thought had been permanently erased by his transformation. When he meditates, he can feel the Force subtly working against the reversal, beginning the slow process of aging him once more. His body is beginning to return to its natural state. "How long?" Leia asks when she sees him wincing as he rises from a meditation session. Days now, Obi-Wan says. Maybe a week. The transformation is destabilizing. The younger I became, the faster the return will be. It's like swinging a pendulum. The farther back you push it, the harder it swings forward. Luke is silent, but his Force presence carries the weight of what he's understanding. Obi-Wan is aging. When the transformation reverses completely, Obi-Wan will return to being an old man. The young Jedi Master who has been teaching him will disappear, replaced by someone physically weaker, but mentally just as formidable. Then we use every moment, Luke says finally. We train harder. We learn more. Because when you return to being old, you might not be able to do the things you can do now. The Empire might catch up. Everything might get harder. Yes, Obi-Wan agrees. And when that happens, you'll have to be ready to stand alone. Or at least to stand without me in the way I've been standing. Your sister is out there, Luke. Arya Skywalker is alive, unaware of what she is, and the Empire is hunting her. You have perhaps a month, maybe less, to prepare yourself. To develop the strength, the clarity, the understanding you'll need to face an enemy that the Jedi Council itself was afraid to confront. By the time the freighter emerges from hyperspace near the outer rim world of Calagris, 3 weeks have passed. Obi-Wan has visibly aged. Not dramatically, not back to his full 60 years, but noticeably. Strands of gray have returned to his beard. The lines around his eyes have deepened. His movements, while still strong, carry hints of the caution that comes with age. But Luke has changed more dramatically. The boy has become someone else. Not a man. He's still young, still new to the galaxy, but not a boy anymore either. A Padawan. A genuine student of the Force, with growing competence and the beginnings of true understanding. His lightsaber forms are precise. His Force sensitivity has awakened into something tangible and powerful. He carries himself with the quiet certainty of someone who knows what he is capable of and is still discovering the limits of that capability. And Leia has become something else entirely. Obi-Wan has learned through their Force connections that the girl carries a secret. Her connection to Luke is not coincidence. She knows something about the third fragment, about Arya, that her father didn't record in his files, something she discovered during her training with her father before his death, something she's been carrying alone, waiting for the right moment to reveal it. There's a settlement, Leia says as Han begins the descent toward Calagris. On the planet's southern continent, a research outpost that was built by the Jedi Order 300 years ago and then abandoned. My father had contacts there. People who survived the purge by hiding their Force sensitivity. People who were waiting for someone to come find them. Why didn't you tell us this before? Luke asks. Because I wasn't certain it was the right place, Leia says. But now, sensing the Force patterns on this world through the ship's sensors, I'm sure. Arya is here. Not at the settlement itself, but close by. She's drawn to the location because of what it is. A place of Force power. A place where the old Jedi left their mark. Obi-Wan closes his eyes and reaches out with the Force, extending his senses across the planet. And there, at the edge of his perception, he feels it. A consciousness that is both new and ancient. Young and old. Fragmented and struggling toward wholeness. Arya Skywalker. Set us down in the Northern Territory, Obi-Wan instructs Han. 3 kilometers from the settlement. We approach on foot, carefully. If we alert her too suddenly, if she panics, the Empire will sense the disturbance. As Han pilots the freighter toward the landing site, Obi-Wan gathers Luke and Leia together. They sit in the cockpit as the ship descends through Calagris's atmosphere, and Obi-Wan speaks the words that he has been preparing to say since the moment he learned about Astra Vane. When we find Arya, Obi-Wan says, you must understand what she is and what she is not. She is not your enemy. The Jedi Council would have made her feel like she was, would have tried to suppress her power, to bind her with their code. But she's not your sister either, not in the way you might be thinking. She's something else. A consciousness that was fragmented to prevent its power from being used, now slowly reintegrating across bloodlines that were never meant to carry her. You're saying she's a weapon, Luke says. That the Council fragmented her to create a weapon that could be deployed if needed. I'm saying the Council was afraid, Obi-Wan corrects. They found Astra Vane 300 years ago when she was already ancient, already powerful, already advocating for a path that the Jedi could never allow. So they did what the Council did best. They created a doctrine to explain why she was wrong, and they hid her away where she couldn't threaten their philosophy. But the Empire knows, Leia says. They understand what the Council was hiding, and they're not afraid of her power the way the Jedi were. They want to harness it, to control it. Yes, Obi-Wan agrees. Which is why we have to reach Arya first. We have to show her that there's another path. Not the Jedi Council's path of suppression and balance. Not the Empire's path of domination and control. But a third path. One that hasn't been explored yet. The freighter touches down, and they begin their final approach. The settlement is small, a collection of buildings built into the rock face of a mountain, designed to be difficult to locate and even more difficult to access. But the Force guides them. Obi-Wan can feel the old Jedi signature of the place, the imprint that meditation and training left on the location over centuries. And beneath that signature, he can feel Arya. She's meditating when they find her, sitting in a chamber deep beneath the settlement, surrounded by ancient Jedi texts and meditation stones that have been here for 300 years. She's young. Physically, she appears to be no older than Luke, perhaps younger. But her eyes, when she opens them and looks at the four of them standing in the chamber's entrance, carry the weight of something far older. "You're Luke," Arya says, and her voice carries an accent that Obi-Wan can't quite place. Multiple accents layered over each other, as if different parts of her consciousness are speaking simultaneously. "My brother, I've been dreaming about you for months, knowing that someone was searching for me, but not understanding why." Luke steps forward, and Obi-Wan can feel through the Force the moment they make their first conscious connection. Two pieces of a broken whole, recognizing each other for the first time, not understanding the implications yet, but feeling the resonance. "I'm Luke," he confirms, "and I've come to find you because the Empire is searching for you too. Because the Jedi Council fragmented someone, and hid her across bloodlines. And you're part of that someone." Arya stands, and as she does, the entire chamber seems to shift. The Force warps around her in patterns that Obi-Wan has never seen before. Not dark, not light, something else entirely. "I know what I am," Arya says quietly. "I've always known, in dreams and fragmentary memories, that I was something more than human, something older. But I didn't understand it until I found this place, until I touched the old texts and saw Astra Vane's name written in the Jedi records. They fragmented her consciousness to prevent her transcendence, and they put pieces of her in us. In Luke, you and someone else," Obi-Wan says. "Someone the records call the third fragment." The Council was trying to hide the knowledge of Astra Vane so completely that even the fragments would never find each other. "But we have found each other," Arya says. And when she smiles, Obi-Wan feels the weight of 300 years of history settle on the moment. And now the question is, what do we do with that knowledge? Do we fight the Empire to stay hidden? Do we fight the Jedi to avoid being controlled? Or do we accept what we are and choose our own path? Leia steps forward. "There's a third fragment. My father left me clues. Not a location, but directions toward finding them. They're hidden somewhere in the Outer Rim, in a place that the Empire hasn't looked yet, because they don't know to look. But I can find them. And when all three pieces of Astra Vane are reunited, then we can decide what she becomes. The question," Obi-Wan says slowly, "is whether you're ready for that. Whether any of you are ready for what it means to carry the consciousness of someone that powerful. Someone that old. Someone that afraid of balance but entirely committed to transcendence." Luke looks at Arya. Arya looks at Leia. Leia looks at Obi-Wan. And Obi-Wan, ancient consciousness in an increasingly aging body, understands that the war has truly begun. Not the war against the Empire. That's secondary. The real war is internal. The struggle to understand what Astra Vane wants, what the three fragments of her consciousness desire, and whether those desires can be reconciled with the needs of the galaxy itself. "We find the third fragment," Luke says with finality. "We reunite Astra Vane. And we teach her what the Jedi Council was too afraid to teach, that transcendence and balance are not mutually exclusive, that the Force is large enough for both." Arya nods. Leia moves toward a hidden chamber in the settlement where her father's records are kept. And Obi-Wan, feeling his body age another year in what feels like a day, reaches out and places his hand on Luke's shoulder. "You're not ready for this," Obi-Wan says. "None of you are. But the Force never asks if you're ready. It only asks if you're willing. And the three of you, in your willingness, might change the galaxy in ways that neither the Jedi nor the Empire ever imagined." As the group moves together toward the settlement's deeper chambers, Obi-Wan catches a glimpse of himself in a reflective surface, The face looking back at him is no longer 18. It's 30, perhaps 30. The aging is accelerating as his young body struggles to contain the consciousness of a 60-year-old mind that was never meant to be compressed into such youthful flesh. He has weeks left, perhaps months, before the transformation completes itself, before he returns to the age he was when he woke up in that cave on Tatooine. And by the time that happens, the war will have truly begun. But for now, in this moment, Obi-Wan Kenobi allows himself to feel something he hasn't felt in 60 years. Hope. The kind of hope that comes not from certainty, but from the recognition that the future is still being written, that the story has not yet concluded, that everything the Jedi Council feared and the Empire sought to control is still being decided by people who choose, moment by moment, decision by decision, what they will become. The camera pulls back as the group descends deeper into the settlement. Behind them, through the chamber's ancient windows, a sun sets over Caligris. And somewhere in the darkness beyond, the Empire's ships continue their search. The Grand Inquisitor continues his hunt. And the threads of destiny continue to weave themselves into patterns that no one, not the Jedi, not the Empire, not even Obi-Wan himself, could have fully anticipated. The transformation of Ben Kenobi from old to young and back again has set something in motion, something that will shake the foundations of the galaxy itself. And it's only beginning.